Before I start, why would I even care about my terminal setup? Well, first of all, I think it boosts productivity, and I am not one of those dudes who create a full-blown IDEs in their terminals. It is possible with nice results, but frankly, I think there are just better tools to do this. But there's a lot of programming related activities, for example, making a Docker image, administering your system, writing a bunch of shell scripts, setting up a CA pipeline, which are not strictly about programming, but it is nice to have a good shell setup to do them. Now, reason number two would be that the shell is the only IDE, let's say, that I know of which works on such a variety of systems. For example, here in Ubuntu, or on Android under tmux, or on Windows under WSL. Reason number three would be that working in a shell allows you to get to know your computer better. And IDEs, the real IDEs are great. I do use CLion very often, but I am aware it just hides and abstracts a lot of processes that happen on the computer underneath. And, when using a terminal-based text editor, for example Vim, you're just less bound to the limitations of such software, because under Vim you can just customize almost every aspect of the editor using plugins that the community wrote, or you can write your own plugin. And that being said, let's proceed to the rest of the video. Alright, let's open the terminal, and I'm using ZSH as my shell with all my ZSH on top of it. So let's see the ZSH-rc file. And when you scroll down and omit all the bloat that comes by default, here I have a line that makes it enter a tmux session whenever I run the terminal. So let's open a new terminal window, and it is already in tmux to save me typing tmux each time. Let's close it, and then going down below, I have a few functions defined, and credits given where credits due. They come from this blog. So I have those functions, and I gave them a little bit more digestible aliases, which is fcd for change directory, fzf find edit becomes fe, and so on. Honestly, I use only those two, and below I bind them to Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-X. Now, just to show how they work, let's open a new tmux session, and inside it, let's press Ctrl-X. And what it calls is it types fcd underneath, so fzf change directory. Now let's change the directory to Splunky PSP, and it found it under dev. Enter to change the directory. Now let's say I wanted to edit main.cpp, so I press Ctrl-Z, main.cpp, and it found it under src, and enter to call it in Vim. Now, pretty powerful, but going to the next key binding I have, Ctrl-O as in open, which calls Nautilus. Nautilus is a Ubuntu file browser, so when I call O as in open, it calls Nautilus underneath, and Ctrl-W to close the window. Again, really powerful, really useful. And the last key binding I want to show is Ctrl-E. Ctrl-E, what it will do is, let's type some bullshit, Ctrl-E will enter this into a Vim buffer. So Ctrl-E, and under a Vim buffer, what you can do is use all your Vim key bindings and all your Vim plugins to, edit what you wanted to type. So I know Ctrl-D to duplicate, or I could use my multi-cursor plugin to break the lines, and just whatever. And then Q to get out of it, and everything is typed into the terminal window. Obviously I won't call it because it's bullshit and won't work, but it is nice, very nice functionality. Speaking of nice functionalities, what I also like in ZSH is the ability to change the directories without actually typing cd. So let's say I wanted to get to the script directory, enter, And it worked. It also works not only with the directory names, but with symbols, for example, 2 dots. So it gets me up in the hierarchy. It works with minus to get back to the previous directory. It works with tilde to get to the home directory. Really great. I actually cringe when I see people doing cd nowadays. And another functionality I like. ZSH will highlight the command I am calling in a different color depending on whether it is in the path or it is not. So let's call echo, it is typed in green, but if I type echo, if I make a typo, then it is in red. It's a nice hint to see if something's wrong. Another thing is syntax highlighting. Let's say I type echo and reference some environment variable here, so pwd for example, and type current directory is pwd. And let's say I call some another process here and do substitution, so echo this comes from another process. Let's enter it, and as you can clearly see, everything is typed in its own color. So a string is yellow, an environment variable is in this deep green, and the command is in its own color palette. Really great, I like it. Now, the plugins that I see people use, but I don't really like them, are, for example, this plugin that makes you print the current repository status. So, for example, if I was in Splunky PSP directory, it would print dev Splunky PSP, and in the end of it, for example, master or something like this. I don't like it because it introduces a noticeable delay, because, surprise, surprise, it needs to call git underneath, and anyway, it makes the line longer, and I think it just, too much information is bad. It obscures, too much information actually obscures the information, at least in my opinion. And, you could solve this by using this plugin or extension, which makes ZSH print only the last directory in which you are, so in this case Splunky PSP, but then you're losing even more information because you have to type pwd to get to know where you are. I don't like it. And now, key shortcuts that I like and I use, and I'll start from obvious ones. Let's type some bullshit here. Control and arrow keys, and I know, but I see people not using this. I see people who don't use control and arrows to jump over words, and patiently they use arrow keys to move around. And speaking of arrow keys, do adjust your speed. I think under accessibility, yes, in Ubuntu it is under accessibility, repeat keys, and there are those two modifiers, delay and speed. Delay decides after what delay keys get repeated, and speed at what frequency. And the settings I have are pretty sane, I think. The delay is pretty instantaneous, and the speed is really fast. Okay, so it was control and arrows. Now home and end. And I know this is not really a key shortcut because this is the actual physical key on your keyboard, but I think people just forgot this key exists. So let's type some bullshit again. Home to get to the beginning of the line, and to get to the end of the line. And I use it not only in the terminal window, whenever it comes to text processing, so CLion, web browser, when I'm chatting with my friends, whatever when it comes to text. Now, Control L, obviously, when you have a lot of bullshit on your screen and want to clear it. Control R to search for your history, so let's say git log or the command with echo, let's call it. Then tabbing to autocomplete. So for example, if I wanted to go to the scripts directory, I would type sc and just use tab to autocomplete it. And ZSH has also this nice functionality which allows you to use arrows. I need to tab twice, which allows you to use arrows to select a file or a directory. So let's say like this, and I can call it. Then the top three of my favorite shortcuts are Alt-D. Let's type some bullshit again. Alt-D will delete a word, because it sometimes happens when you type some command and you need to remove some flag, and it's really powerful. And coming to the next two, Ctrl-U and Ctrl-K. They are pretty similar in what they do, because Ctrl-U will remove from the cursor to the beginning of the line, and Ctrl-K will remove from the cursor to the end of the line. And those are pretty powerful. I use them in in ZSH, but I also bound them in Vim because they are so productive. Tmux, and I'll start by showing you the most productive tmux plugin that there is, and I mean tmux fingers. Now, tmux fingers allows to copy any link or a file system path or a hash, be it git hash or a docker hash, to your system clipboard without using a mouse and in a very convenient way. As a means of example, let's get to Splunky PSP directory and let's print a bunch of file system paths to the screen. I'll do so by calling find on the source directory. Now let's press enter, and now let's assume I want to copy the path to the tmux.txt. It is in the middle of the screen. I do so by pressing Ctrl-A and capital F. Now all of those paths got highlighted with a letter written in bold in front of them. tmux.txt has K in front of it. Let's press K, and now it is in the clipboard. Let's confirm this, as you can see. Nice. Let's do the same thing with a link. So first let's get one printed on screen. Git remote get URL origin, and let's copy it. Ctrl-A, Shift-F, S, and it is in the clipboard. Nice. Now let's do the same with a git hash. Let's assume I want to copy the second one from the top. Ctrl-A, capital F, K, Q just quit, and it still works. But it won't always be that we want to copy a link or a file system path or a hash. Sometimes you'll want to just copy an arbitrary block of text, and you can still do so in tmux without using a mouse, and you do so by entering a mode which I call visual. Let's say you wanted to copy the output of ls-all. So we call the command, and now by pressing Ctrl-A and opening the bracket, you enter the visual mode. You can now move the cursor around. So if I want to copy this whole block, I navigate to the end of it, press Y as in visual, and now I can do the selection. I selected the whole block, now I press Y as in yank, and get to a text editor, because it is a system clipboard. I can paste it wherever I want, not only in the terminal, I can paste it even in my web browser. It worked, but there is also this mode, which I wanted to show, which is rectangular selection. Let's assume I wanted to copy only the column with the date. So again, I entered this visual mode, but this time I press Y succeeded by R, as in rectangle. So I select the column with the date, Y as in yank, and copy it here. Nice. This visual selection is also useful when you just want to scroll through your terminal history. I can do it with my arrow keys, or page up and page down. Page up and page down are really underappreciated. Now, you may also look for some particular string. Let's say you do a compilation and it resulted with an error, and you want to look for a phrase, error, and a colon. Now we can look for a string by just pressing the / and typing the phrase. So let's look for tmux.txt, enter, and it found 15 results. Now we can toggle between the results by pressing N for the next result and Shift N for the previous result. All those features I mentioned before still work, so I can do a selection and let's yank this. It works. Nice. But tmux is most widely known for its support for session management, for terminal session management. So let's create a new session. Ctrl-A, new. And now I'm in a new session. Let's list the session. I do it by Ctrl-A and pressing S. And I can now move around between the sessions. Let's get back to this new one and press Ctrl-A and capital X to dispose it. Y to confirm. And now, each session can be split further into panes. Let's make a vertical split. And now, I can move between the panes with arrow keys. Ctrl A, arrow to the left, and I am in the left pane. Let's type something, Ctrl A, right arrow, and let's type something here. Now, each of those panes can be further split. Let's say I want to do a horizontal split. And I want to resize this pane. I do so by pressing Ctrl A and having the Ctrl key still pressed. I use arrow keys. Nice. Now I can dispose the pane just as if I wanted to quit a terminal, so Ctrl D again, and that's it. Now, for the sake of completeness, let's open my tmux conf. In the beginning of it, I rebind the default meta key, which is Ctrl B, to Ctrl A, because Ctrl B is just inconvenient as fuck. Now, then, I have the section with my plugins. I have tmux fingers, which I already shown. There's tmux sessionist, which just makes it easier to manage the sessions. Yank for copying, peacock. Now, peacock is a nice plugin which changes the color of the tmux status bar. And it doesn't sound as a big functionality, but it just keeps you aware of in which session you are. So let's create a new session, and the status bar here is this bright green. Let's get back here, and this dark green. Let's create a new one. It's purple now. Let's get back to the original one. Nice. Now, in the end of it, I just do a few more key rebindings, so V for visual selection, R for the rectangular selection, and Y for yanking. And that's all for tmux. And lastly, my Vim setup. Let's open a new terminal window and make it full screen this time and navigate to dev Splunky PSP. And guess what? Let's edit tmux.txt. And before I start, I want to note I'm greatly influenced by the tools of JetBrains. I very much like the CLion, PyCharm, Rider, IntelliJ, and so on, and I wanted to replicate the same experience to the extent it is possible in Vim, even with the same key shortcuts. So, for example, commenting lines is done with the same key combination, so Ctrl /, and works like a toggle, so I can comment and uncomment with /. It detects the file extension and adjusts the comment character accordingly, so it will be different for a .py file than for a .cpp file. Going to the next functionality. In line 6, there's this include cmake current platform.cmake. What if I wanted to open this file? Well, I place my cursor somewhere here on this path and then type Ctrl B. It opened it in a new tab. Now, I navigate between the tabs using the Alt and arrow keys, as in CLion. Now, if I wanted to close the tab, I press Ctrl and W, as in a web browser. Then, another functionality I wanted to show is the path suggestion, path autocompletion. So let's duplicate this line, and let's say I wanted to include something from under cmake/directory, and it suggests all the files that are present there. Let's say I wanted something from the modules directory, so enter / and there's a single file there, findasdeal.cmake. Enter, and it works. Obviously, this is bullshit. I don't want this. I delete this. Another functionality is an actual file browser, and you open the file browser with the very same key shortcut as in CLion, so Alt1, and this here. You can search for a file name with / as in the buffer, so scripts. Let's say I wanted config /psp.sh, enter, and it opened it in a new buffer. I can close this and close the file browser. Nice, it works. Now, another functionality I wanted to show is searching for a file with a given name. And again, the same key binding. So Ctrl N, let's say I want to open main.cpp, it is here, enter, and I am in this file. Now, what if I wanted to look for a specific string? I then press Ctrl F, and let's say I'm looking for int main. And it found it in source/main.cpp. Note that this is fuzzy searching, so it doesn't look for the exact phrase. It looks, it more or less, it tries to connect the words. So I'm looking for int main and found int start inside a file called main.cpp, so it also suggested it. But then it is int main here in the first suggestion. Enter. And I am in line 80, int main. Then, another functionality. Sometimes it happens that you need multiple cursors because you want to apply the same change in multiple lines. So you press Ctrl and use arrows. And now I have multiple cursors. Let's say I refactored the directory structure and now everything is under third party and /src. Obviously it doesn't make sense, but this is just for the sake of example. Now that's what multi-cursors are for. Now going with the next functionality, saving with sudo, because it sometimes happens that you need to edit something that is write protected, for example etc hosts. Now let's duplicate this line a few times, and there's even a warning changing a read-only file. Now to save it, I need to call the plugin. There's a plugin called suda, and I'm calling a function called suda_write from this plugin. So enter, and asks me for a password. Obviously I can't provide the password because everything is recorded, so I won't. But let's close this. Let's close this buffer, and oh, it actually mixed the contents. Now, this should be good. There's a few functionalities in Vim that are in vanilla Vim. You don't need plugins to them. For example, going to last edited place, you can do it with this sign and then dot. And it persists between the sessions, so I can close Vim. And if I now edit semiclist again, I can still jump to the last edited place. Now obviously searching for some string or for example opening a terminal, although I don't like opening terminal in Vim because I prefer opening just a separate pane with tmux and here doing the stuff I want to do because, you know, tmux persists, the history and all is just better. Now the last thing is undoing. Let's say I duplicate this line, you just undo stuff with U under Vim, pretty basic stuff. And that would be all with Vim. Now this will be irrelevant in terms of the shell, but as it is still in the topic of using your computer without using a mouse, I'll right now show you how to use a web browser properly. So there is this plugin called Vimium, and it is in the most of the popular web browsers. It is definitely in Safari, Firefox and Chrome. It may be under a different name, but the functionality it provides is the same. And what Vimium does is similar to what tmux fingers does. So let's visit some web page. Let be wikipedia.org, and let's say I want to click right here on the English Wikipedia. So what I do is I press F, and now all those clickable elements got highlighted. So to click English to visit this link, I need to press A, and it worked as if I clicked on this element. Now the other functionality that this plugin provides is copying to clipboard. So let's say I want to download the archive with the most recent OpenSSL. So OpenSSL, download, and this plugin works on just any website. So I can again use it here, SJ, the downloads page, SL, and let's scroll down. Here it is. Now to copy a link, I'll use Y succeeded by F, and right now I am in the copy mode. So I'll press D, and the link is right now in the clipboard. So let's use it. Let's open the terminal and actually download it and just got downloaded. Nice. Now, there are those other shortcuts that your web browser definitely provides, which you may be not aware of, but they don't need any plugin. And let's start with, for example, navigating through tabs. To create a new tab, you'd press Ctrl T. To dispose the tab, you'd press Ctrl W. Now, if you have a bunch of tabs, to navigate between them, you'd use Ctrl Tab. To get to the previous tab, you'd use Ctrl Shift Tab. Now let's close them. If you want to focus on the address bar, you'd use Alt V. And let's get back to Wikipedia. And to create a new window, you'd use Ctrl N. Pretty useful, huh? Here I have a few suggestions when you're making your own shell setup. First of all, create your .files repository. I have mine under github.com/beef.files. Why .files? Because, you know, all those config files, they tend to be named with a dot in the beginning, just for them to be hidden. And inside the .files repository, you'll keep all your config files. Here I have the tmux config file and the vim config files. Let's open the vim directory, and you'll want your vim installation to be scripted, automatized, to be deterministic, to work same at each invocation. Because frankly, when you will switch devices or reinstall the operating system, you just won't have the strength to, the willpower to do your own setup from scratch again. So here I have setup minimal.sh. It is a shell script which does the it clones the plugins here, starting from line 40. Then I copied the vimrc file, which is the vim config file. Speaking of it, let's open it. It is vimrc minimal. Now, I call it minimal, but it is 400 lines. And don't feel intimidated. This is a cumulative effort of almost 1 year of using Vim. And here I set up my aliases, my functions, I add the plugins. Once they are cloned, they need to be referenced in this config file. And there will be a time when you won't be satisfied with your setup, so you will tear this down and re-implement this again. So it is really fluid. You won't do this overnight. Don't feel intimidated. It is playing a long game. Now, going to the next tip I have, good Vim resources. So there's this YouTube channel, Luke Smith, and he has a bunch of Vim related videos. He also records on history and religion, and I do actually like those videos. Vim. Now, Vim tips you probably never heard of. Vim will actually change your life, blah blah blah. Now, those are really good videos, especially the Vim Diesel's official Vim tutorial Let's Play commentary. And yeah, I like this channel. Anyway, there's this other channel called the Primigian, I think. Yes, Primigian. Now, he also has a lot of videos on Vim. Here's your first vimrc, so, a tutorial on setting up your Vim config file. A lot of videos. I am done with Vim. This is actually clickbait, by the way. And that will be it for learning resources. And as with everything, just find some community where you can share your vimrc and just hype over someone else's setup and so on.